All right, hello and welcome back. This is our first full real lesson on counterpoint, which is what we're starting with in this class. And of course, the name of this course, Harmony and Counterpoint. Actually, we're doing it in the reverse order. We're starting with counterpoint and we're seeing how that connects through harmony. And the reason for that is because we're, in a sense, walking through history and the evolution of Western and classical music and how that connects to today. So usually I like to start with a discussion about, well, what is harmony? What is counterpoint? We don't have too much time here to do that because I want to get into the lesson. I want you to go to the link that I've shared. This is the Glenn Gould playing the Invention number 13 in A minor. I won't play it here only because I don't want a copyright claim, but this is a great, well, it's really just a recording. It's not much of a video. But you get to hear a true master of Baroque playing, and a true personality, true virtuoso of the piano, Glenn Gould. So I'd encourage you to listen to that. Once you're done with that, why don't we take a look? This is a video that shows the scrolling score, so we'll get the chance to follow along. So we'll pick apart a little bit what's going on here. So let's listen. Okay, so perhaps you've heard a bit of this piece before, perhaps you've attempted it yourself. In fact, if you're looking to improve your keyboard skills, it's not a bad idea to spend some time with the inventions. Bach wrote a good number of inventions, which are usually two-part, meaning there's a line or melody in your right hand, a line or melody in your left hand, and they're essentially happening at the same time. Hence our discussion of counterpoint. Now, what we're dealing with first in this class is an older style of counterpoint. Here, of course, Bach living 1685, 1750. This comes later in our study. And if you were to continue your studies, harmony counterpoint, if you went on to a 4-year degree, you're going to be looking a lot more at this style. But let's look at the basics. So you start with a melody in the right hand. You might even try some of these notes, E, A, C. Now, if you notice, even in this first 3 notes, E, A, C, you'll notice that it outlines a chord, and not just any chord. If you look at our key signature, 0 sharp, 0 flats, it's either in C major or A minor. It looks, by the beginning and end of this piece, it looks like it's centered in A. Also, the fact that we have a G sharp right away, that leads me to believe that, that's the leading tone. So that's leading us in the direction of A minor. Okay, well done. But in this right hand, you'll see E, A, C, that we are outlining an A minor triad. And this makes a lot of sense because we're establishing the key. So even though you have a melody in the right hand, a melody in the left hand only, it's suggesting more than one note versus one note. So this is where Bach is suggesting harmony. So just because we're looking at counterpoint doesn't mean that we're not also considering harmony. That first chord is suggesting a 1 chord in the key of A minor. The next chord we go to. You also want to look at the left hand as well and see how that fits in. Yes, we have the G sharp. Okay, that's a 5/7 chord. And then back to. So if I were to add up all those notes, on beat number 1, you have A minor. Beat number 2, you have E7. Beat number 3, you have A minor. That's a 1, 5, 7, 1. Okay, so you probably have looked at music like this in some of your studies already, and we're going to get deeper and deeper into, well, how do these voices interact with each other? But at the most basic level, we should see today that what we're dealing with is very linear music, meaning that you have a note in the right hand, a note in the left hand, if you were playing this on piano, or more accurately in terms of how it was presented historically, a note, let's say, in a high voice and a note in a low voice. Because at first, in the history of Western classical music, we're talking about church music a lot of the time, and that means vocal music. Okay, so that was a little teaser about Counterpoint. I would like you to go on and check out these other clips. I think they're fun. They're reimaginings of the Bach invention. All right, can you hear that those two are related? Well, of course, but this is in a more jazz style. So she's altered, Kayoko Oyobi has altered the rhythms, added some harmonies, but she's still playing those very similar lines. Okay, so there's counterpoint in jazz as well. This other video here, which you could watch more of if you'd like, does the same thing, but in a rock context. Okay, so here this is more of a basically a transcription where we're taking note for note what was in the original, and this person has programmed or programmed some drums and bass along with. So it's much closer to the original than Kayoko's version, but it's interesting that this music is speaking to musicians of today even still. So many people spend time with the Bach inventions, the Bach chorales. It's not a bad way to wake up in the morning and take a look at a piano piece. It gets the brain moving, gets the fingers working, and there's a lot to discover in these pieces that could be applicable, that could apply to your music that you're interested in, that you're composing, or that you're performing. Okay, so let's go on a journey of a historical journey. Well, if we turn to chapter 9, we'll be spending time with music of the 15th and 16th century, which sounds very, very, very old. And you're saying, well, how does that connect to music of today? Well, I'm going to show you. In fact, I already did on last week when I played some of your pieces that you are especially inspired by, and I was trying to connect that to some concepts that we see in this course. It's actually very easy to see how elements in pop music and in hip hop, rock, whatever kinds of music you are into, even modern classical music. Well, of course, modern classical music is very different, but it's still based on these foundations that we're all raised on, and just being aware of this history and the progression of how harmony and counterpoint progressed, we could see how it connects and how it's useful for us today. So I would encourage you to read through this text. We won't do that here. The main definitions you need to be aware of: what is Cantus Firmus, what is first species. Okay, so let's say if I were to go over here to here's an example. This is a very simple example by the composer Fuchs. Here, let me play this for you. Okay. Okay, it's not the world's best melody, but or counterpoint, but this is a good representation of what's called first species counterpoint. Now, what is species? Well, basically, species means a kind of. It also means essentially, if we were to say first species, second species, well, you could relate that to step number 1. This is what we start with. Here's the next progression, step number 2. Okay, so we're going to walk through this art form of counterpoint. We're learning the basics of counterpoint. So species 1 refers to note against note, meaning, let me get my writing utensil, meaning that we'll have a note in the, we're going to have a note in the upper voice, and a note in the lower voice. So here, upper voice versus lower voice. So this is 1-to-1 counterpoint. That's what species 1 means. Okay. So what else is going on here? Well, I asked you to know the definition Cantus Firmus. If you see down here, it says CF. Well, guess what that stands for? Cantus Firmus. The part that's going against the Cantus Firmus, counterpoint. Okay. If you go over here to our definition, you can see Cantus Firmus means the given line. Let's say I gave you the melody Happy Birthday. Okay, let's call that the Cantus Firmus. Well, I'm going to create a counterpoint that goes against it. Okay, so I was just improvising a counterpoint in my left hand. By the way, I can reverse it. Let's say I put the Cantus Firmus in the left hand and I put the counterpoint in the right hand. That would sound different. Okay, not the world's best counterpoint, but you get the idea that there's a given line and there's a line that's written against it. And it doesn't matter if that given line is played in the higher voice. Let's say if the women, sopranos and altos sing that, or if the men sing it, the tenors and basses, they can be exchanged. So if we go back over here to our first example, again, here we have the Cantus Firmus in the low voice. So let's say the men are singing this. And here you have the counterpoint in the high voice. So let's say the women are singing that. Okay, well, if we were given this line in the low voice, do, re, mi, do, la, ti, do, so, mi, do, re, do. Notice some basics about it. One is that, well, we're in the key of F major. How can I tell? Well, there's one flat in the key signature. We're starting and ending with F. There you go. There's your definition of establishing the key. So you're going to look to the Cantus Firmus and see where it starts and where it ends. That is the key. Okay, so we have our key. What are some other conventions that we see in first species counterpoint? Well, we're going to take that Cantus Firmus, and every Cantus Firmus that we're going to look at in this class will end re, do, or you can also say it second scale degree, first scale degree. That means the same thing in movable do, right? Re, do. Let's look at the counterpoint then. What are some conventions that we need to know, some rules or guidelines that we need to know in order to write a successful counterpoint? Well, again, do we always have to start on the root note F? Well, no, actually in this case we do, but actually we'll figure out together. There are some other options. However, it is very common to start with the root note do or the first scale degree. Okay, so this is common. However, what you absolutely must do, let's look at the end, what we call the cadence. We must end on the first scale degree here, so do. And preceding that, right before it, is scale degree 7. That's our leading tone. Sometimes I'll call this T do. So if we have re do in our Cantus Firmus, we're going to meet that with T do. You might try this on the keyboard or your instrument of choice. You could even sing it if you want. Re do is your Cantus Firmus. That was down here. Up here you have T do. If you have both at the same time, as you can hear already, we're establishing, this is a moment of rest or pause, or let's say the period at the end of that sentence. It's a stopping point, and that's what we call the cadence. Okay. What's something else that we're going to be looking at this class? Well, we're going to be looking at, so we know how to start, we know how to end. We know about Cantus Firmi, which is the plural of Cantus Firmus. We also know about the counterpoint. Okay, what else are we studying? Well, we're looking at horizontal motion and vertical motion. Okay, so horizontal and vertical. We have both at the same time. In fact, think about it. Don't we always kind of do this with music? There's always unless you're singing a single line melody, usually there's, let's say, a melody and a bass line, or melody, chords, and bass line. Or maybe even in hip hop, you might even have a rap that is a counterpoint rhythmically to the bass line or the groove or the beat, right? This would still be considered a kind of counterpoint. So we're still looking at vertical and horizontal. Okay, so why don't we look at this motion first? So we're looking from left to right, and we're going to look at one voice at a time. So let's say we're to look at the Cantus Firmus first, because we usually do. And in this class, you're going to be learning how to compose a counterpoint against that Cantus Firmus. So let's look at this motion here from left to right. So we have F to G, and this is where I would go around the class and ask, well, what do you see here? Well, of course, you're saying, that's a step. Okay, this is that's G to A. Okay, that's another step. Okay, here we have A to F. So we had do, re, mi, do. Okay. Now, if you sing this, you can really feel it in your body. If you play it on the piano, it's not such a big deal, right? Quite an easy figure for the fingers. If you sing it, do, re, mi, do, la, ti, do, you can really feel these skips. These skips feel like a bigger thing. Now, why do we call this a skip? It means that we're skipping over one note. So also known as a third, which I know you know your intervals well. You should know that that's a third. We skip over one note. If you were to continue analyzing, you'd see, okay, that's a step. That's a step. Oh, here we have do, so. Wow, this feels very dramatic. This big leap, F to C. Okay, if you sing that, you can really feel that is a big leap. That's the leap of a fifth. Okay. If you keep going here, wow, this is a lot of skips. So, mi, do, re, do. Okay. Even though we do have a skip here, leap, if you look through and you just look at how many steps you had, you'll see that for the most part, both the Cantus Firmus and the counterpoint mostly will be made out of steps, meaning that it's conjunct. Conjunct means mostly stepwise motion. And why do we mostly have stepwise motion? Well, because it's much easier to sing. If you try singing only leaps, and you'll see what I mean. It's very difficult to sing. For example, our national anthem. Oh, say, can you see? Very difficult anthem because it's filled with leaps. This is why we have our most famous singers singing at ballparks as opposed to an everyday citizen who might not be able to sing it very well. It's a difficult piece. Okay, so this is one aspect of analysis that we'll be looking at in this class, which is from left to right. But also, we're looking from top to bottom. We're looking at two notes at the same time. So I covered up the answers here because I want you to see what you can do. In fact, you might turn to this page. This is page 167. You could pause the video here and see if you could identify the distance between the top note and the bottom note. Or it doesn't matter. You can go the other direction, bottom note to the top note. You'll come up with the same answer. Okay, so go ahead and pause here. Try to see if you can come up with the answers. Okay, and when you're ready, we're going to look at the distance between the notes. Now, I didn't say you must identify the perfect intervals, major, minor. In this class, we're mainly looking at the number. So if you were to count F to F, of course, that would be an octave. G to E, that would be a sixth. A to C, that would be a third. Now, you might have come up with the wrong numbers, and sometimes this happens. This happens quite frequently at the beginning of this course, because it's very easy to do what's called invert your intervals, meaning, wait, which G and which E? Wait, which A and which C? Because it does matter where they are. So what I want you to do is find these notes on the keyboard, F to F. Okay, that's an octave. What about this G in the left hand to this E in the right hand? You need to look at them in space, because if you, let's say, invert them, let's say you go G up here to this E, well, that's a third. That's not what that interval is. So in that case, this would be G to E. That's a different G. We need to put this G in the right place. So if you had trouble with your intervals, you might have inverted them. So make sure you do this homework at the keyboard. It really helps to visualize the space between the notes. Okay, now what do you notice about these intervals? We have an octave, sixth, third, octave, third, sixth, octave. Wow, I feel like I'm repeating myself quite a lot. What do you notice? Well, aren't we missing? We're missing the seconds. We're missing the fourths. We're missing the sevenths. What are all those things? What category do you put them in? Okay, I know what you're thinking. You're saying, oh, well, these are all consonances. Right? If you didn't know that already, it's something you should know already. Consonances. What are consonances? Well, we have the perfect octave. Actually, let's start from smallest to largest. So perfect unison, the consonants. What about, third? Fourth, actually, no. And I'll explain why later, but for now, we should just remember this. And sixth, and perfect octave. Okay, so these are the consonances that we're dealing with. And I should say harmonic consonances, meaning at the same time, note against note. Okay, so let's write that down. Harmonic consonances. Now, what do you notice from this group? Well, of course, we have the perfect intervals. Oh, I should have said key 5 as well. So let's group these together. So this will be perfect unison, perfect fifth, perfect octave. These are the perfect consonances. Okay, harmonic, perfect consonances. Okay, what about? And I'll put this up here so we have more room. What about the imperfect, harmonic, imperfect consonances? Okay, we'd have the thirds. So these could be minor or major. And we could have sixths. Okay. This is what is allowed in species 1. Okay. We're talking about harmonic distance between the bottom note and the top note, or the top note to the bottom note. Doesn't matter which direction you go. This is species 1. And we already said harmonic. That's in terms of harmonic intervals. Okay. So again, take a look through your example. Octave, sixth, third, octave, third, sixth, octave. Okay. So this is why, it's missing dissonance. It's missing that push and pull that we often have in most pieces. Most pieces have a sense of dissonance. At first, we get rid of that dissonance because we're going to add it in later. We're going to see how dissonance operates in counterpoint. Okay, so hang on to these basics. We looked at Cantus Firmus, counterpoint, how to end in the counterpoint and in the Cantus Firmus. We looked at horizontal versus vertical motion. We also saw what are the allowable intervals, the harmonic intervals between the low voice and the high voice, and we said they must be consonant. They can be perfect and they can be imperfect. One thing you should know about beginning and ending exercises, you need to have a perfect interval. This needs to be unison, fifth, or octave. This is how we begin an exercise. At the end, we kind of, this is a prescribed thing, right? It's something that's not going to change. If you have re do in your Cantus Firmus, you need to meet that with ti do, so that these intervals will not change. Okay, so I think this was good for a first example. We also talked about disjunct versus conjunct motion. Okay, so if you look over here in your example 1, it says try it number 1. You're already able to label. This says label the harmonic intervals between the staves. So you're looking at the distance between the two notes, right? You can do this. Again, do this at the keyboard so that you're not accidentally inverting your intervals. Then it says label any skips or leaps between melodic pitches. So now we're looking this direction. Okay, so the distance between C and D, for instance, is that a skip or a leap or a step? And of course you're saying, oh, well, that's do re. Oh, that's just a step. Okay, so we're not going to label that. What about D to F? Well, didn't that skip over the note E? Pretty sure. Okay, so we're going to call that a skip. So that's what they mean by labeling any skips or leaps. Okay, so you're going to go through and look at motion from left to right. All right, and number 3, beneath the score, this is the score, circle the appropriate word that describes the predominant type of motion. Predominant meaning the overall. So in the upper voice, the Cantus Firmus, is it mostly conjunct or disjunct? In the lower part, is it mostly conjunct or disjunct? Remember what conjunct means? This is stepwise motion. Disjunct are involving leaps or skips. Okay, very good. So that's try it number 1. That will be due with your next homework assignment. We skipped over a couple things. Here's another example of species 1. And again, we have the Cantus Firmus in the low voice, counterpoint in the high voice. Oh, here we have a different key. This is starting on D, ending on D. This is re, do. Look at this, we have ti, do. But what do you notice in the minor mode? In order to have ti, do, of course, you know this already from your previous class, or at least you should, that in the minor mode, to have ti, do, you need to raise that 7th scale degree, right? Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. In the low part, we have the Cantus Firmus, you have re, do. Right? In the counterpoint, you have ti, do. At the same time. Okay, there we go. There's our cadence. Okay, we've established our cadence. What about the beginning? Well, again, this starts on do. Do, so, fa, mi, re, do. Okay. And how is the counterpoint working against it? Well, here we have the octave starting. Remember what are the 3 ways to start? I just told you. It has to be perfect intervals. So it's either going to be perfect unison, perfect fifth, or perfect octave. Here we have an octave. Now, some of you might be saying, well, isn't that more than an octave? Yeah, actually, that's 2 octaves away. But in this style, we simplify everything to its smallest version. Okay. Over here, they have identified this as a 10. Usually, I just say 3. It depends on how this is taught. It depends on the textbook. This is one thing about theory books, is that every theory book is a little different. Every author presents things a little differently. but the main idea should be the same. Okay. Besides that, though, this is operating very similarly to our major example, but now we have the minor mode. So you'll look at the motion from left to right. We already sang through the Cantus Firmus. What about the counterpoint? Do, te, do, re, me, do, ti, do. Again, it's mostly stepwise motion. If we look at all of the intervals here, the harmonic intervals, these are all, again, consonances. 8, 3, 3, 6, 8. This is, I would call this 3, 6, 6, 8. Okay. Why do I circle the octaves? Well, that's because I'm teaching a style that's more common. This textbook does not use all the same things that I do, but I would encourage you to start circling your perfect intervals. And the reason for that is that it alerts you to the fact that these are sometimes problematic. We're going to see why pretty soon. But at first, just get into the habit of when you see a perfect unison, perfect fifth, perfect octave, I want you to circle it. Okay. Here I just circled these because I wanted to call attention to them. Okay. Nicely done. And there are a couple of things to avoid. We're going to get into this a little bit deeper. So if I'm going too fast, you can pause at any time. You can go back in the video. If you feel like you need a coffee break, that's fine too. Okay, but I'm going to keep going. All right, so here we go. Now, remember, we're looking at the distance between notes, but we're also sometimes looking at from left to right and how the two voices are related. So again, go ahead and see if you can figure out the distance between these notes. If you want to pause and see if you can identify these intervals. Okay, do that. And when you're ready, here are your answers. Did you invert any of them? I hope not. It's very easy to do. Now, one thing that we want to definitely avoid is the use of chromatic notes. Okay, and what do I mean by chromatic notes? Well, if you look here in the Cantus Firmus versus the counterpoint, you'll see that we have a B flat in the low part and a B natural in the high part. Okay, we want to avoid those chromaticisms. Okay, same goes with the counterpoint here, B flat to B natural. Okay, again, we want to avoid chromatic notes in this style. Are we saying that all chromatic notes are bad? No, not at all. But it's something we avoid in this style. Okay, this is what's called a cross relation. Why is it a cross relation? Because it's going from one voice to the other. This is just a chromatic half step, which we also want to avoid. Okay, so and look at how this is occurring. Well, in the minor mode, sometimes this is more of a problem because the minor mode sometimes uses those raised 6th scale degrees or raised 7th scale degrees. So this can be a problem in terms of, well, if you're not paying attention to where else those scale degrees are happening, you might fall into this trap. Okay, so this is getting in a little bit into the weeds. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed on this first day. I think we're getting down the basics really, really well. Okay, so we'll come back to this idea on another lesson. Okay, so I want to make sure that you are set up for your homework for success. So the other big thing you need to know today, which is very important, has to do with different types of motion. Okay, repeat after me: contrary motion, parallel motion, similar motion, and oblique motion. You have 4 types of motion that I would like you to know. These come up in this class and in music in general all the time. Once you start seeing this, you're going to see it everywhere. All right. Sometimes I like to relate this to pretend like we're in the classroom, and let's say you walk into the classroom and I walk towards you and we shake hands, and I say, "Nice to meet you." Okay. Well, I look forward to that day. Hopefully we can have that moment. When you walk towards me and I walk towards you, that's actually called contrary motion. And let's say if you walked away and I walked away at the same time, that's also contrary motion. Okay, we're walking towards each other and away from each other. Perhaps you've heard of contrary motion in terms of practicing scales. Okay. Another kind of motion is parallel motion. Okay, so this would be as if, let's say you were walking out the door and I was walking towards you and I said, oh, you forgot your homework. Let's say that. Or maybe the opposite. Maybe you walk in through the front door and, oh, you ate something smelly this morning, garlic bagel, and I walk away from you. Okay, here we're walking in the same direction at the same time, the same amount of distance. This is called parallel motion. So perhaps you've heard of practicing parallel motion, for example, your scales in parallel motion, going at the same amount at the same time. Okay, those are easy enough, contrary motion and parallel motion. Now, similar motion can be confusing. Similar motion means, well, let's say you were running out of the classroom and I was walking towards you. Okay, you ran out, you said, I can't take it anymore. I can't listen to about, I've had enough, I need to go. And I'm walking towards you because I'm actually just walking to my car. Okay, this is similar motion. We're going the same direction, but you're going faster. I'm going slower. Or vice versa. You could be walking into the classroom and maybe I take a big leap back. Okay, here again, we are going in the same direction, but by different amounts, by different speeds. Okay, that's similar motion. The last one is easy to understand, oblique motion. Oblique motion means that, let's say I was standing still and you walk towards me and you say, teacher, can I ask you a question? Or vice versa, if I stood still and you walked out of the classroom and I'm still at the chalkboard erasing something. That's oblique motion. One voice is staying still, the other voice is moving. Okay, so if we look back at our chapter, we're going to see examples of these 4 types of motion. And notice what, in that example I gave you, we're always talking about 2 things. It has to be, here we were measuring the distance between you and me, you the student, me the teacher. But here, let's apply that to a piece of music. Now this has, I'm sorry. This has all similar things in it that we've already seen before. If you look at that, here we have the Cantus Firmus in the higher voice. Okay, this is something new. And the counterpoint is in the lower voice. Remember, I told you that they can be switched. Okay, and again, Cantus Firmus is going to start on, in this case, do. It's going to end re, do. These are the given pitches. That's the given line. The counterpoint, we need to end T, do. That's the 7th scale degree, moving to the 1st scale degree. See this little circumflex? That's the little hat on top of the number. That means scale degree. This is 2nd scale degree, 1st scale degree. So again, this is our cadence and it's happening exactly like we're used to. Okay, good. What are some other things we're used to? Well, in species 1, take a look at all your intervals here. These are the harmonic intervals. And we know that in first species, all of these will be consonant. Here we have unison, third, sixth, octave. So I'm going to get into the habit of circling the perfect intervals, which I want you to be doing at home as well. Okay, so here we've circled all the perfect intervals. Okay, good. Now, here I'm going to cover this up just a little bit so you can't see the answers. I want you to try to discover the motion yourself. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at 2 things at the same time. So this can be a little tricky. If this voice is moving up at the same time that this is moving down, and they're moving by the same amount, right? Do you remember what that's called? one voice is moving up, the other voice is moving down. So they're moving away from each other. Okay, that's contrary motion. Oop, not oblique, contrary. C for contrary. Okay, good. This one, same thing. Moving up, moving down. Even though this is by a third and this is by a second, right? This skips and this steps, that's okay. This is still called contrary motion. This looks different. The top voice is moving down. The bottom voice is moving down. Notice that this is by a step and this is by a step. Okay, they're the same amount. So that means what? Is it parallel or is it similar? Okay, it's parallel. Good work. Has to be the same amount. Again, voice moves up, voice moves down. Okay, that's contrary. Are you getting to see how this works? We're looking at the relationship between the higher voice and the lower voice. Again, moves up, moves down, contrary motion. Top voice moves up, bottom voice moves up. Parallel thirds. Okay. It's not similar because they're moving at the same rate of speed. P for parallel. Okay, and this voice moves down, this voice moves up. So even though they're going towards each other, that's also contrary. This looks different, doesn't it? This voice is staying the same, and this voice is skipping down. What's that called when one voice stays the same and the other one moves? Oh, right, that's oblique. Okay, and here I'll leave that so you can see it. And again, this is skipping. This is stepping. Okay, that's also contrary. C for contrary. And lastly, voices moving in. That's contrary. Okay, sorry, it's getting a little messy here. And let's see how I did. Okay, so these are all the same answers that we marked in. Okay, so this is what I'm going to be asking you to do in try it number 2. It says, in the example below, write the harmonic intervals, just the numbers, right? You're not saying, you don't have to say major or minor in this case. Here they already started. And by the way, start circling. Circle every time you have a perfect interval, okay? Then identify the motion between the intervals. So is it C for contrary, S for similar, O for oblique, P for parallel? Now, if you look over here, how much do we have of what? Well, mainly if you look through, it's mostly contrary motion. There is some parallel motion. There was one moment of oblique, and there was no similar motion. Now there are opportunities to use similar motion. I wish that they use an example that did use similar motion because it does happen. In fact, in this style, you usually don't see much oblique motion, but that's okay. It's good to see what it is. So primarily, we're going to be using a lot of contrary motion, and that's because it avoids problems using contrary motion. Parallel motion, similar motion, those can get us into trouble. Oblique motion, as we'll find out, we're going to use that to get out of problems that we just can't avoid. We'll think of it like an escape hatch where, you got yourself into a problem and you need to escape it. You can use the oblique motion. Okay, again, if I'm going too fast, it's all right. We're just getting down the basic concepts. I just want you to know the basic concepts of contrary, similar, oblique, parallel. Be able to see the motion. So for instance, this voice is moving up, this voice is moving down. Okay, they've already marked C for you. Okay, so you're going to continue like this. Voice moving up, what's it called? Okay, is it parallel or is it similar? Okay, that's for you to figure out. Okay, and let's finish up today. So if we look over here at try it number 3, it says, the counterpoint below includes some common errors. Write the harmonic intervals between staves and then circle any Parallel perfect intervals. What is that? Parallel perfect intervals. Well, I told you, perfect intervals can get us into trouble. And why is that? Well, if we look here, of course, we know our perfect consonances, perfect unison, perfect fifth, perfect octave, right? These are not bad things, but they are places of rest. The unison, the fifth, and the octave. They're so consonant, they so agree with each other that it feels like a place of rest. So if we have, let's say, a whole series of perfect fifths, it's a very Gregorian kind of sound, a very old sound. In fact, there is an older style that does use a lot of parallel fifths, but this is a new, this is comes slightly later. All right, this is what we call 16th century counterpoint. So in this style, we want to avoid parallel fifths and parallel octaves and parallel unisons. And why is that? Well, we don't want to stop the sense of motion. The whole idea is to create a long, beautiful, flowing line from beginning to end. Here we have another example. Here we have a flowing line from beginning to end. Nice arc to it. Okay, so it doesn't have a sense of stopping until you get to this cadence. Right? And that's the whole idea. If you have a whole series of octave to octave or fifth to fifth, it doesn't sound very smooth. It sounds like we have these accented notes. Let's say we were going along, right? They kind of jump out, those fifths and those octaves. They jump out in the texture. So we have to be careful how we approach perfect intervals. Okay, so here are some examples of things to avoid. If you find yourself writing an octave to an octave, this is going to be a problem. This results in parallel octaves. Same thing here. If you find yourself writing a perfect fifth to a perfect fifth, again, parallel fifths. What if you go in contrary motion though? You said contrary motion is good. Well, no, actually it still has the sense of accenting the notes. Right? It still accents, it brings out those as louder than the others, when we want smooth, flowing, beautiful lines. Same thing here. This is a fifth moving to a fifth. Again, opposite motion. Doesn't save us here. Fifth moving to, this is accented. It's not smooth and flowing and beautiful. Okay, so, and this is why I have students circle. And by the way, this is not my technique. This has been around for a long time. I would encourage you to circle all your perfect intervals because you are alerting yourself to the fact that, oh, these are sometimes problematic intervals. It gets even more complex because we have to, so these are easy to spot. Parallel octaves, parallel fifths. Those are easy to say, oh, okay, so that's easy to see. There are two back-to-back octaves or two back-to-back fifths. I can spot those easily and I can fix them. I'm going to change one of those notes so I don't do that. However, there's a harder one to spot, and those are called hidden or direct octaves or hidden or direct fifths. How are these different? Well, look where you're headed here. Let's say you wrote this on your, this is the Cantus Firmus that I gave you, and I asked you to write a counterpoint. Okay, and you came up with this answer. Well, this looks all right, and at first we have parallel six. That's okay. We like parallel six. There's no problem with that. In fact, they move really nicely. Or parallel thirds. That's fine. But what about when we approach an octave? Again, we're going to circle this. Notice which direction this is headed. This is leaping upwards, and this is stepping upwards. Well, actually, this is a problem. This is similar motion. And similar motion we have to be on lookout for because, again, this has the sense of accenting this note. Let me play this for you. Let's see if you agree. So we have, right? I hear that as an accent. I hear this as taking me out of that smooth flowing beautiful line. Now there are other styles of music where that's fine to do, but we're learning a really specific style of counterpoint, and we're going to learn later how to introduce dissonances and other types of rhythms, and things will get more interesting. But at first we're starting really, really simple, so we're going to stay within these boundaries. Okay, and what's the other style? The way of thinking there is that you're essentially filling in the gaps. You're filling in the gaps. If your ear kind of fills in what you skipped over. And if you did that, you would end up with parallel octaves. So that in a sense, you're recreating parallel octaves by the use of that leap. If you don't buy it, well, you could at least say this certainly pops out of the texture, and it doesn't promote smooth, beautiful, flowing lines. Okay, so you can think of it either way. The same goes with hidden or direct fifths. Same idea, where let's say I gave you a counterpoint. Let's call this the Cantus Firmus down here and the counterpoint up here. Let's say this was your answer. Well, there's a problem here because this is skipping down, this is stepping down. Oh, actually, this is going in the same direction, but by different amount. That's similar motion. You have to be on the lookout for similar motion, because if you're going in similar motion to a perfect interval, again, it has the sense of accenting. Or in this case, and the other way to think about it is that you're filling in the other note. So in a sense that you are recreating the sound of parallel fifths. What's the whole goal there? To make smooth, flowing, beautiful lines without accent or without stopping points. Okay, so now you know. I know there's a lot of information I'm throwing at you. And again, you can repeat this as much as you want. Slow it down, take breaks where you need. You're going to take that information and see what you can figure out with try it number 3. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do, write the harmonic intervals. Easy enough. You're looking from C to C, D to D. Oh, I see problems already. F to A, E to G. Remember, you can go in either direction, from top to bottom, bottom to top. You're going to label the intervals. So that first one is a perfect unison. Let's just say U for short, so I can have enough room. And we're going to circle it because it's a perfect. Now, you already know right away, ooh, this goes from unison to unison. That's against the rules. These are parallel unisons. So even though, let's say in another style, this might be fine, in this style, it's illegal. We don't want to do this, okay? So we want to label that. We're going to label it in our homework. We're going to say what the problem is. So this is parallel unisons, okay, etc. So you're going to be on the lookout for the problems in this try it number 3. Okay, I hope this video was easily understandable. I hope you made it through without fail. But of course, if you have any questions, you're always welcome to email me. We can set up a time to meet if you're confused about something. The main thing I'm looking for is that you try. I want you to get a sense of what are the concepts, and we're just learning the basic building blocks of this style. I'm not expecting that you're going to be masters of counterpoint by the end of this course, but you will have more knowledge, and you'll have a foundation on which you can build. So if you take another class, you'll say, oh yeah, I know what first species is. I know what second species is. I know how to begin and end a counterpoint. I know what kinds of consonants or dissonance I can use with different types of species. So by the end of this course, you will have that foundation. So don't stress if you're confused at all. I want you to just give it a try and see how you do. Okay, best of luck, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. I'll see you all shortly. Take care.